Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We are now live. I'm in Bergen. Where are you? Can't hear you. Let me know. Type, comment, hello, I'm from wherever you are. That would be very nice. We know who you are. If you're watching this later on YouTube or on LinkedIn where it's stored, thanks for watching this. And again, welcome so much to this webinar about management of change. Is that a data issue? It's an issue that is costing the operators enormous amounts of money when they are making changes during operations. And today, we've got some experts lined up to discuss this issue. We got John DeWart, a well-known consultant for everyone in this industry, and Usama Sabir from Mool, Pakistan, a very senior drilling engineer who have also appeared on shows with us earlier on. So I look very much forward to hearing their thoughts on this issue so we all can learn something new. The plan for this webinar is to first give you a brief introduction to the topic, some background information. Then we'll open up for discussion. Then we will shift the topic a bit more towards the data aspects and discuss that. And towards the end, we will be discussing, we will sort of be moving our anchor a little bit into the future to see what the perfect solution would look like and how we would be operating with the perfect solution. And please share your comments all the way so that we can bring them in as questions throughout this show. We got 1 hour planned. I hope to fill that with content for you. So please share so we can give you the most value. Let's see. All right. So what is the not best time to make decisions? Is it 3 a.m. or the other way around? 3 a.m. is not the time to make big impact decisions. But why do we do that? I asked LinkedIn and I got some very interesting replies, which I will go through briefly. What is the cause of 3 a.m. calls from the rig? Bad planning, lack of empowerment, and toxic environment, or some more details into this? $1 million BHA lost in hole, impactful events. A call that starts with Houston, we have a problem. Thank you, Osama. We'll get back to you soon. Stuck pipe. We know that issue. Problems with surveys and some very detailed reports here. The direction of drilling is asking you to circulate the bottom ups until we can fix ourselves. This seems very specific. Wireline crew has exhausted its entire loadout of tools. Things are happening. We drilled into a fault that wasn't as expected. We need to create a new plan that kicks off somewhere else. Can you see if we can do it and how much more drilling we would need to achieve the original XRY of plan TD? And that's a complete replanning of the well. So the industry most definitely replied that this is an existing issue with decision-making happening at 3 a.m. And we have interviewed asset owners from many companies and asked them what is the biggest challenge with well planning and well operations. And that's what everyone comes back to. So planning a well, we know how to do that. Getting it approved, we know how to do that. Where the pain really sinks in is when your plan doesn't last until TD, and then you start the management of change process. That's when you need to scramble all the experts. You need to make quick decisions because the rig is waiting. It's very often a choice between a high-risk operation or a loss of production or injection potential. So is a stressful situation. It's not something you want to experience. And it's costing the oil companies a lot of money because their investment was based on a plan, but then the plan doesn't last to TD. So now what? Now what? How do we make these decisions? A quick walkthrough. I'll do this in the video format instead of... So here's the management of change problem quickly visualized. You start out with a plan. You do more data analysis in the planning phase, adding more details to the plan. You are creating more value. You're reducing risk by planning better. You see the value is going up, the risk is reducing. But then you write a document where you put in the headlines. And then the plan doesn't last all the way to TD, and you need to make new decisions, and you wonder, what happened here? How did we end up in this situation? So I think that was my general presentation of the issue. We probably have one last slide summarizing this, the same way as what was on the front page of this invite. Transferring knowledge from planning to operations is challenging, leading to 3 a.m. calls from the rig. The plan is no longer valid. We are so good at creating value in the planning phase. There's no shortage of experts or specialist applications in this industry. We can think of everything, and very rarely are we surprised by what actually happened. We had thought about it before. The challenge is we have reports and we have workflows that doesn't allow for transferring all the information and knowledge that has been gathered. So when you get into operations, you're missing a lot of the data that was available during the planning and created in the planning phase, and you have to stretch all the limits to capture all that data. So that's the pain of our industry, which is costing us enormous amounts of money every year. So that was my introduction. I promised you experts' opinions and a good discussion. So I think John DeWard and Osama, I'll just bring you into the show here. How are you guys?
Oh, all right. Thank you, Magnus.
You're going to mute, Osama?
Yeah, this happens with online meetings. So, yeah, thank you very much for inviting. I think it's great to be here again. I believe so. So I'm looking forward to have a very candid discussion on this topic.
Very good. So let me just bring up my first question to get the discussion going. It's relatable, I think. How does it feel to make decisions when the plan no longer applies?
Well, obviously, it's difficult. I think that the thing is, when the plan no longer applies, is to actually stop and make the operation safe. And from that perspective, start to replan. I think if you start rushing into doing things, you actually make the situation worse. And I think, well, my experience is working on offshore projects is that the people on the rig should start the replanning themselves, because they're the ones who have the data as to what happened, and then bring the people in from onshore. And of course, there is the issue as to who has all the data that can be used for replanning. But actually stopping and spending the time to replan, I think, is the way to be successful going forward.
Osama, what are your thoughts? What does it feel like to make decisions when the plan no longer applies?
Well, yeah, I mean, when your plan does not apply, I mean, it has two factors in that. I mean, whether you have foreseen those scenarios, or there was a lack of effort on that part, because due to multiple reasons, you have too much data or too less data, or well, obviously, if you are stuck into that situation, it's a difficult one when you are making a decision up in the middle of the night or early in the morning on your own or with the limited set of information. So yeah, that happens quite a lot, and it takes away a hell lot of time and money from the well, but it's probably not accounted for as it should be. So that's the problem also. I mean, you don't account for the uncertainties that for which you have taken the decision at the well, and obviously those costs and timeline are not taken into account. Usually they are difficult to take into account due to data workflow errors or processes. So it's a merry-go-round, a very difficult solution to get a concrete solution out of it. It's sort of a ad hoc process on every well, and that was something that I was interested to talk about.
What are your thoughts? What's the difference between a management of change situation and following the plan?
So, John, would you like to add your comments first? Or? Yeah, I mean,
You go ahead.
sure. So for the management of change, I mean, from my experience, even for the MOC process, it's difficult to enforce religiously. It's following a plan. It's easy if everything goes on right. But MOC is part of the plan also. That if you have something that is out of your typical scenario, you'll do this step and this step, and then you'll change the well plan or anything related to your well operations. But even then, if the processes are too cumbersome, you may not have a very valid MOC process also. So you just improvise and make decisions that are not based on the data. So MOC as a process is where it's I doubt that it's as much implemented as we think it is, from the data and the cost perspective.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to rush and take a decision because they assume certain things. And that's where I say you ought to stop and replan, especially if it's a significant event. Because if you replan properly, you can then go through the management of change and get the proper sign-offs that this is a new plan that is as robust as the original plan, but again, for the new situation. So really, it's about getting the right people involved, the right data involved, and then coming to good decisions and then executing those decisions. All easily said, but sometimes, I think people sometimes want to take a quick decision themselves and hope, it's a wish that things will turn out well, and then they don't turn out well. So actually, just sitting down and doing a proper replan is the way to do it.
Yeah, very good point. You emphasized that the offshore team or the operational team should be doing the replanning. What are your thoughts on what should be done onshore or from the headquarters, and what should be done from the operational team?
Well, I think the offshore team should start the replanning, Magnus. So they start the process because they have the information to their hands as to actually what has happened, and they have the offshore data themselves. But then they need to involve the onshore people, and it can transition to a collective team event so they can work with them to take the decision. Of course, if it's a major change, then the decisions have to be approved by the onshore people. So I think it's just starting with offshore, getting people together, focusing on the problem, and then solving it as a cooperative team from onshore and offshore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid thought process. I mean, we have this situation where if something has changed in the operations, and usually it's a call from the rig site to the office, and instead of getting that call, if there is a consultation at the site, and solutions that come up from the site, and it's driven from the delegation of authority at the site also. So if you have allowed your people at the rig site to make those necessary changes and come up with a solution, or whether what's the hierarchy of the system is. So and it's always better to get the recommendation of changes from the people who are doing the job at the site. So I perfectly concur that.
Well, I think the other thing as well is when you get the input of the people from the site, as I said, they have the first-hand knowledge of what happened, but also you want to get their ownership in the action plan. So if they're involved in creating the new plan, then they're going to better implement it than if it's just a plan given to them as an instruction.
I think that's very interesting, yeah, John. What data? In what way is the operational team, offshore team, more up to speed on recent events than the offshore team? What makes the difference?
Well, you said it was 3 a.m. in the morning. They're the ones who've been undertaking the operation. And, you know, the driller was there when it happened, whatever it was, or the company man. And they firsthand have the knowledge of what actually, well, they have the data of what happened. I think you have to often go through interpretation. And I think that's one of the challenges in our industry is actually to take what you've observed, take the data, and then to make an interpretation as to what actually happened. The better your interpretation, then the more robust plan you can make to get out of that situation. So I think interpretation of what actually happened is a key issue. I've actually seen a relief well operation. Well, it was a re-entry in a blowout where somebody drew their impression of what was blocking the re-entry at about a couple of 100 feet. And then it was less than that probably, but they drew their impression of what was happening downhole and everybody bought into it. And then I went and got an offshore underwater camera because it was 18.5/8 casing. We circulated to water. We went down with this offshore camera, took a photograph and saw something completely different. But unfortunately, the lead guy had used his diagram and convinced everybody. So the interpretation was incorrect, but it was one person led everybody down that path. So I think when you actually take the data, digest the data, and then look and interpret what's actually happened, you can create a better foundation for analysis and going forward.
Very good point. And what data is more available onshore, and what data is more available offshore? Yeah, we mentioned offshore. It's the recent event. It's the experience from the people who are hands-on. What is more available in the onshore organization? What's the value of their data?
The onshore organization has the background data that went into the plan. That's what they have. And, you know, that's one of the things is to actually transfer that knowledge, that background data knowledge to the offshore people when you start to implement the plan. So go through processes like a DWAP, drilling the well on paper, or a pre-spud, in order to transfer all of that knowledge that's not necessarily written down in the drilling program, so that they have the background to why decisions were made to actually execute in a certain way. If the offshore people understand that, when they see certain data coming back that doesn't correspond to what they envisaged, they know what is happening and they can take action.
Yeah, I think this begs the question of how much data is available to the team at the site, and can they make this kind of changes with the limited data set that they have? So, depending upon the culture that we have worked in, sometimes there is there's a lack of data available at the site due to systems or different limiters around processes. So that probably is two things. Probably people, if don't have the delegation, they would just highlight the change that they need instead of discussing that at the site. And then they probably don't have that much amount of data or the data that is really needed to have that consultation dialed in. So I think the other question, if we all agree that the changes should come from the site where they are going to implement it. The other question would be is what kind of a data do they have, and is there a system to have the same kind of data responses from onshore team and the offshore team? So let's say if your offshore team has the similar set of data, they probably can make a very good decisions, and they only need probably approvals from the side team and the onshore. But it's not the case, I believe. So And this is, I think, an important aspect of this management of change process,
Yeah,
because you don't. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. I think when you talk about data, I think one thing that's really interesting is to look at human machine interface. So the graphics interface, how is the data presented? Because it's fine to have tons of data and lots of, well, not Excel spreadsheets, but lots of columns of data, lots of squiggly lines. But are you actually presenting the data in a format that it makes sense and it can be used and interpreted? And I think that's one thing that we're improving on it, I believe. I see companies now changing the graphics. But if you have a look at an aircraft and you look at the way the data is displayed to the pilot, it's far more intelligent than the way that we do it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to actually not just throw data to people, but to put it in a format that they can actually digest it and interpret what's happening from that data, or interpret what was used in the initial plan. And then they can understand why decisions were taken, and then they can put their new experience into that decision making and come up with a replan.
Let me ask you a question. So most drilling engineers, supervisors, managers, they are problem solvers by nature. You become a problem solver by being in the drilling and well domain. I mean, in drilling and well, we can't always do as planned, but we can fix it within 24 hours. That's sort of regardless of what the challenge is. And then you have the asset owners and the subsurface team who are dependent on the output of the well, and typically they are involved in the planning, setting parameters, targets, goals, risk evaluations, and also they sign off. Let's invest in this. How do they perceive the processes that kick off when something unexpected happens?
Well, it usually is. But usually is long emails. I mean, and sort of transferring the blame instead of problem solving, because they don't have the complete picture. So I think the first step is a knee-jerk reaction, that why this has happened and why have you deviated from the plan. Probably that kills the initial discussion part also. That's just the initial part is usually not why have this happened, or what could be the reason and what could be the solution. The initial few comments is this, who has done this. So that changes the whole tone of the conversation.
I think that you got to look at it this way, that the asset owner is the one who's holding the purse strings. And then also the subsurface team are the ones who have the model as to what it is, the subsurface model as to what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So as things change, of course, they must be involved. And the more integrated they are into the team and into the planning process, the better off your plans are. They have the model. You've got to involve those people. I think as well, when you come around to involving people, if in a DWOP, if you involve people from the rig crew, you can learn a lot of things that are relevant to that particular rig that you may not know, and that can save you a lot of consequences. I've seen that quite often, where someone speaks up and they tell you something about the rig that needs to be fixed or needs to be changed or needs to be managed in order that you can drill effectively. And they're the ones who know it. And when they get listened to, you can really change things.
Very good. I'll move on to the next topic. Thanks for a very good discussion so far. And Osama, you mentioned emails. That's where the discussion typically kicks off. I'll take this back to this schematic of the workflow, and this is something that we have been discussing a lot in OSDU, in the Wells Data Foundation project, where we're building the new OSDU structure for tomorrow's operation. So having our workflow has a broken lineage. It goes through the documents which were introduced with the CVP process 20 years ago. It was very hot and fancy to have the CVP process, so that you can control the amount of people you are investing in a project, so that you don't run off building a full plant from day one, but you have controlled investments through all the stages. The challenge with that workflow is that it introduces a lot of decision documents, and the decision documents is what is being read, and also what transfers from one phase to the other. And that's almost true, because all the other information, which is in specialist applications, or in meeting summaries, or in where present PowerPoint presentations and everywhere else, that information transfers through the head of the people, because the process only captures the data which is in the document, because that's what the manager signs out. Then the rest of the information is either lost because you can't access it again. It needs that specialist who made it, or it is in the head of somebody who did the work. And this happens multiple times. So it kicks off in an early phase project where you have subsurface or exploration, or looking at a field development or an exploration field. And then they make decisions, and then they forward this to the next stage in the CVP process. And then you work more people come in, more details are created, more value is created. Then you write a document again, which gives you the headlines of what you decided. But it's in a format where it's made so that a manager can read this, and the manager can say, yeah, this is the plan. And that limits the amount of data you can put in there. You can't describe 20 contingencies in detail in that process. And unfortunately, again, data is lost. And then you head into operations, which is also very document-driven, with detailed operational procedures of different formats, and more people coming in. And since the workflow itself is document-based, it's very little data that can travel in this workflow. All the extra data, which is what populates decisions, is traveled through the heads of the brilliant people. And as mentioned before, there's no shortage of brilliant people in our industry. But the workflow is putting a lot of pressure on these people when things are changing. I mean, we're good at driving, we're good at thinking, but we're not very good at doing complex scenarios while under pressure. That's not our strength. That's better to do in the planning scenario, when you can be in the calm of your office and with your colleagues and you have time. So this document workflow is giving us a lot of low quality data in terms of documents, and the high quality data is often left behind in specialist applications or in the head of people. And this is causing the knowledge transfer, because 9 out of 10 times we understand what happened when something went wrong. We had already discussed it in the planning phase, or it happened earlier on in a different well. But the workflow didn't allow for all the contingency plans and details of that plan to transfer into operations. And therefore, you end up with uncertainties and management to change processes in operations. So, management to change. How is this a data quality issue? How do you see it, Osama and John?
Well, looking at the diagram and listening to you, one thing that comes to mind is be very careful of tick the box mentality. Some people do a checklist when they go through the stage gate, and they tick the box that they've done something, but has it been done as rigorously as it should have been done? Has it been communicated well enough and analyzed? The other thing is, in this process, the process can run well when the right people are involved and they stay involved in the process, which means often your subsurface people are involved through the whole process. So they're always there with that model that's also in their head. Yes, it's in their computer, but they have the information that's in their head. So I think that makes this, as you might say, a more inefficient process. Now, companies are applying agile processes to this. So they're making it in short bursts of integrated teams, and then they're reassessing, do another short burst and reassess. And what they're actually doing is compressing the cycle time from months to weeks. So they have proven that this is a way to improve this process. And it's very much getting the people involved. I think the other thing that comes up that you're talking about is contingency plans. And often people don't make contingency plans. My experience is if you have a good risk register, And if the team collectively, it's a collective thing, works on the risk register and comes up with what are the high risk potentials of risk and uncertainty. So it might be subsurface uncertainty that something may be different. And if it ranks high enough and it's economic, then you build yourself a contingency plan. And I can tell you in one operation offshore Norway, development wells with active faults through the overburden and in the reservoir section, we used to have 5 contingency plans and they were plug and play. So rather than getting a call saying this has happened, what should we do? You read the report in the morning that we picked up certain equipment because we're now executing the contingency plan and we've inserted that sequence into the schedule that we've got going forwards. So I think it's a real combination. And yeah, there are opportunities for sure to make this a lot more efficient. And I know Agile is one, Lean is another, and then I think digitization as well.
Yeah, I think the last word is the most important for me, and you probably have a different experience. Lean for the wells that we have experienced is I don't know how do the people progress on that, but digitalization is something that probably can make the biggest change. The offset wells, let's say, are different companies. The asset has been bought multiple times. So if you have an offset well that was drilled 20 years ago, and if it has not been digitized, you have really difficulty getting the meat out of that 200 days drilling well for the next well that you are planning. So that's in a recent well that we are planning, we faced this difficulty because the wells were drilled 15 years ago. The data was so haphazard and it was manual, and we are obviously planning a well for in a 2022. So things were not making sense because you can't get the data out of it, and depending upon the explorations wells that you have, so we had a very less data, a high cost well. So digitalization is something that I really look forward to, that can probably change things for the better in the future also. Obviously there are multiple ways of doing it, from the project management perspective, from agile to lean, and a typical project management cycle of multiple stages. And that especially the project management cycle gets into, as John said, into a tick box process where you have stage 1 and stage 2 and stage 3 sign, and you have a well that you later on, if you are working, you understand that the planning has not been done so rigorously, but all the stages have been completed and every stakeholder has signed on that. So yeah, there are ways to handle that data also, and there are probably way to digitize the data so that you can get the best out of it.
And what are your thoughts on the amount of data that is generated in the planning phase? How much is available during operations? What do we do today to transfer knowledge?
I mean,
Yeah, yes, yes, John, please go ahead.
oh, sorry, it's typically it's within the program. And then the other part that's outside the program is doing DWOPs and pre-spuds, so that you're actually communicating to the people who are going to execute the program the background information to that program, so they understand why it's been written, why decisions have been taken, so that they're better able to own the plan and implement the plan. But that's quite a laborious process. I mean, it takes time and it takes money to get the people together. And a lot of companies are not willing to invest that money in the upfront planning. They'd rather keep the costs down, produce a paper drilling program, and send it to the rig. I mean, I must say that today, the activities that are executed on the rig are actually being pre-planned digitally these days. So there are new processes whereby you can build up all the digital planning and then send it to the rig, and you can track exactly how things are going. So it's not all paperwork anymore. But still, producing a plan without investing as much as you need to in creating the contingency plans, in sharing all of the background knowledge so that there's ownership of the people who are executing the plan, then I think you can leave gaps that cause problems.
Osama, you had some thoughts?
Oh, I think nothing much. I think I agree with John, and especially about communicating the data with the team at the site is very important. And obviously, the data is usually available. While I don't think the planning data is available to the field team or to the site team as much as we think it should be, because the other thought process or the other factor would be that you probably are overwhelming them. So so it's a very selective piece of it. If you have a drilling program and offset data, but that's not the planning data. Usually, your planning data is a huge, a multiple number of wells that you work on, and then you select the best of the best wells and put them up as the offset wells or performance offsets and geological offsets, and you share those couple of 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the offset that you think that your operations team can digest. So if the data is digitized and everyone can access that, I was working with some another project in which we had 30 wells as offset, but obviously those were very similar wells also, but the data was not available to the site team, and probably 2 or 3 wells. So if anything out of those 2 or 3 wells or anything out of that drilling program happens, usually you will be the unlucky guy to receive that call. So there's a lack of data transfer also, maybe due to multiple reasons. The processes are not as efficient as we think they are. The other thing is that communicating that data with the team is also very important, and I have experienced this while doing the section pre-spud meetings or section meetings with the team. That if you have done a pre-spud meeting or DevOps exercise 4 months back on a 6-month well, half of your crew is gone or probably change, and you have a very little control of 110 people that are living there at the site for the 6 months. So doing a regular checks and have those pre-section meetings has helped us a lot. And we were in the middle of the well, another section, and based on the last of 2 sections, team has pointed out something very important that made us do the MOCs without getting to that problem. So those meetings and those communication of data is also something that can help.
Yeah, I think the thing, Magnus, is convey that information and, well, data, and therefore after that it becomes information to the people who are executing, as Usama says. But you've got to be careful not to overload them. They have a lot of daily activities and things to do themselves. So the question is, what information is it that you convey from, say, your offset wells that are flags that they may observe, that they can ring the bell and say, hang on a second, this is not going according to plan, because we're seeing similar things that we saw in the offset wells, which may indicate something is happening. So I think that the cleverness is to be able to convey sufficient information to give them the background and the overview, such that they can raise the flag when some things are going off. As Osama said in his example, they can raise it before something terrible happens. So they get the early warning signs and can raise the flag from that, and then you can discuss and replan. But I think if you give them all the data in a data format that the planners used, you're just going to overwhelm them. I think you have to be very clever and sophisticated in how it is presented to them.
I think you're touching the core there, John, on the risk of our industry. Why do we continue, or what is creating this overload of information? Why are we talking about an overload of information? Why aren't we adjusting the operations to be able to handle all the information available? Why do we set the bar that we need to reduce the amount of information flowing in instead of building a structure which can use all data?
I think if you build a structure that presents the data in a way, well, it's information when it's presented, isn't it? So if it presents it as information that they can consume, then I think you've reached it. You've achieved what you want to achieve. And I think that that's the clever part about it. And of course, a DWOP is trying to do that, because you're telling the people all the background and hoping they remember some of the things and why decisions were taken in certain ways, so they have that background. But if you can have a clever way to present it to them, relevant information with what activities they're currently undertaking, so that they can see that without being just overwhelmed by here's all the offset wells, go and look through them, then I think you've got a very good way of bringing them up to speed so that they can be way more effective.
Yeah, I think the challenge over here is to see the value of creating those processes that digitize the information and put that up, that converting that data to the information. So having a process, a software or something, or a way of doing that, of analyzing those 30 wells, or whatever the wells that you have, and have this process have this data process into, as John said, into information that the team at the rig site can use or may not use. So if they have a problem, they have 2 or 3 wells that are digitized, or they can access that, or instead of imagine that they can just see the data that is already been plugged in. So the value of creating these processes is not realized up till now, I think. So let's say that you have the field team hit a problem, a roadblock, and they have realized the solution, and they'll call you. But what you will do is usually you have a multiple times of the data of the field team. So you'll take your time if you have if you are working in a normal time period, let's say in the day, and you will stop the operations, and probably you'll take a different decision also based on the amount of data that you have. So now there's it's a bigger MOC process and all that. But and this usually it's a by the book process of a management of change that has been concluded. So but there is a loss of time, decision making, and confusion at the rig side. So the value of this lost time is not realized up till now to the to companies, I think. If we can realize that value and propose a solution that cut back on this, then only we can move forward. So the companies would be good issuing 3 or 2 MOCs for a well, but they would not realize that issuing those MOCs takes time, creates confusion, and if you have a better process, you probably don't may need those 2 MOCs. You probably cut down to 1. So there's a value in that time lost, in people motivation loss, and lack of power that the site team feels that whatever we suggest, the team at onshore can change that at their whim, because they don't have that complete data. They don't understand that. So I think that's another challenge also.
I think, Magnus, there's a really interesting comment here from Stuart Rogers, which I think is a very high value, and that's the onshore team supports the offshore team to execute the job. If you look at lean manufacturing, basically you're focusing on whoever's doing the work in the production, that you're enabling them to do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. And so when the onshore team takes that role of support to enable the offshore team to really execute, then they should be looking after the offshore team in terms of giving them information that they might need at different times during the well. And it's a real shift from the old 1960s, 70s command and control from the office, where the office told you what to do and that was it.
Very, very good. I think, let's see if I can get this sorted out. Put me back there. So I think we discussed on a lot on the challenges with the data. I think it was a very good observation that it's emails which are being sent, and emails are very hard to send all the information. You can send a few lines, and you need to think of who's the recipient and try to be specific, and you're in a hurry and you need to communicate to more people. Then all the planning work has to go through decision documents. And then we have other processes where we're sort of compensating for the lack of information flow. We talked about DevOps, drilling well on paper, where we invite everybody in. So all the people, we need all the experts and all the executors in the same room. And as Osama mentioned as well, if it lingers, if it takes a week or a month, you might not have the same people available who you already trained with or went through this with. And that's a very risky way of working. It's how it's done most of our industry, but it's also the big value of our industry is to create a high quality data flow where the data is captured in the planning and it's forwarded into the operations. So I really love this discussion. Now, Here's the last challenge for John, who is already a big star in our industry, and he's up there. He knows everything. And then you have Osama, and he's like, watch Osama. He's the rising star. He's going to be the big one. He is already a clever and insightful engineer. Follow his LinkedIn posts on limiters and more. And read John's papers. He is publishing the insights we need for this business. But I would like to, in the last segment, sort of position us in the future. So imagine we have the asset owners in the room. They are paying for this. You have the subsurface team who has their input. And we are there as the drilling and well engineers. And in this future, we have a well plan that is a data set. Imagine we can transfer all the information. The team shares the same experiences and they improve it every day. They're working on continuous improvements because they can transfer all the data from the previous well, the contingencies, the offsets, everything grows continuously. And the plans and goals, they last all the way to production. What does that mean? What is our what changes in operations? How does this impact decision making?
So you're looking at a digitized future. I think if you look at, well, digitization and digitalization, two different words. Digitization is turning documents and reports into digital format, and digitalization is actually changing the process with digitized systems. So I think really changing the process, having the data in one place where people can access it, or at least it's got linkages to the sources so it can be accessed. So therefore you can actually go and get a view. Everybody can get a view of what everybody else has. And it's shared. I mean, the industry now is looking to share a lot more data than historically they have. There has been a reluctance to share data, particularly formation data, subsurface, but that's changing. And now with those systems, I think people can look and they can see what everyone else can see. And I think that will help a lot. I think it's the way that it's actually presented. As I said, if you go around to the modern aircraft, commercial aviation, and you look at how the information is presented to the pilot, he doesn't get everything about what's happening with the plane. He gets what he needs at this particular time for this particular operation. And I think that's the way to present the data and to make sure that I think in this sense, I would say if you can emulate the DWAP and pre-spuds through a digitalized system, you're going a long way forward because you're bringing that data to the people doing the execution. And then, yeah, I think you have to still go back, push this information in a format that can be consumed to the offshore, to the drilling people on the rig, and then make sure that the people in the office are in support mode of them and tracking and raising where flags are coming up that they recognize may be leading to a different outcome for a section of the well, that they can raise the flag and say, hey, we need to be aware of this, and therefore we need to consider taking a different action.
Osama?
Yeah, I think that's the sort of future that we should look into. We are looking into. I think the companies have started making changes, and if they don't, they would not survive. So that's survival of the fittest kind of situation. If you are not making informed decisions and you are still stuck into that 90s or 80s, and your competitor is making a multiple time profit out of their wells, you are losing out. So probably the cost of building those processes and the survival of the company, and it's always a cost benefit analysis. So the building up those processes takes time and cost, and understanding of the people. And now companies are making effort to be more efficient. So the problem, one of the biggest problems I have faced is that you have either no data or less data, or you have too much of data. Probably that's not data. That's documents and documents and documents. So if we can, as John said, if you can have a data set that is turned into an information that you can just pick and choose when you want, when you're stuck into that situation. That will probably minimize a lot of changing process, management of change process. So, on a recent well, we had to update our mud weights to, we were surprised that we had that high mud weight. And Fortunately, we had that offset data, and everyone has that data. So instead, the field team recommended that we should look at that well also, and that is mimicking this mud weight issues and the wellbore stability issues. So instead of going into a situation where we have lost time incident, we picked it up because the data was presented to them in a very good way, and they were able to make changes and suggest to us those changes and got those approvals in time. So if you can have a future wells where data is presented in an information and pluggable way, where team can make decisions, there's a lot of margin and cost and performance that can be taken.
Very good. Well, what's the first step? What do you think? Getting to capturing all the historical data and making it available.
And the risk analysis. So the team should understand that what kind of risk they run into if they are not going with this process. So again, if you're not going to improve the process, you will not survive, or you'll not have your wells drilled in a better situation. You'll have your AFEs blown up. So that will force people up that they need to make better decisions, and for that, they need to have a system that is efficient. Our present systems are not as efficient in some places. I think that can make you know put people in uncomfortable situations so that they make changes in the processes.
Wow, yeah, fantastic comments. I mean, talking about the importance of data availability and data quality in the management of change discussion. I love it. This is the core of what we are working on in our industry. I really appreciate your sharing of thoughts and inputs.
And Matt, just a comment there. I think there's a couple of things about getting more data or sharing more data and converting it to information. We need intelligent systems, of course, to do the conversion to information. But actually, part of the data, as you know, say with the WDF, the Wells Data Foundation, is actually to make data in a format that it can be shared. So one of the issues with digitalization and automation is actually sharing data in a format that it can be shared. And people are working on that today. Some people see there's a big issue that needs to be standardized, and others are making solutions themselves out in the field with their implementation. And I think what we're seeing now is a big advance in digitized systems. And as we start to see activities being digitized and actually being fed to the driller, and then next those activities are going to be fed to the automated system with the driller in supervisory control, big advances are going on. And I think with that, we're going to see a big change in the way that data is consumed and the way that data is brought to the people on the well site. And I think that, well, like automation, I think one of the big issues is less about the technology and it's more about the business model. And if you have a big discussion on automation and the rate of adoption, a lot of it comes down to if the business model was changed, it would be adopted faster. It's less of a technical issue. And I think the same is going to be happening with digitalization. And of course, digitalization is once you solve the communications aspect of sharing the data and having it in a format you can use, and once you get intelligent about the presentation, then it'll be adopted fairly quickly. I think we're not too good on presentation. We're not too good on human machine interfaces because we still produce squiggly lines for data, which is squiggly lines because it was a potentiometer with a pen strapped to it in a drum roll on a geolograph from the 1950s. And I think there's better ways to present that data once you have an electronic system that can reprocess it.
Very good. So we know both of you are brilliant experts And there are also lots of brilliant experts watching and giving us challenges in form of comments and questions. I haven't been following, but I see Peter has been very active and Stuart has been very active here. Let's see. Are there any questions here, or did they have their own discussion while we were having our discussions?
I think there was a lot of discussions there and points that they were making that are in the chat.
Well, that makes me very happy. If there's one thing I want is for these discussions to spur further discussions. So I can't really see any clear questions from the audience. So I think
Peter had a very great comment on in here, where he said that we need to look at other industries and technologies on the implementation side. So, and John touched based on that also. So we, as a whole, probably do not learn from other industries as much as we should be. Probably are in a silo, and the digitalization that has taken place in other places with the data and the huge amount of data that they use can help us out if we think that we need to come out of our silos and look at the other industry. So I think I agree with Peter on that also. That we think that we have too much data and it's very difficult to process, and uncertainties and all that. But if you look at other industries, they have the similar situations also, and they have come leaps and bounds from what they were in 1950s, 60s, or 80s, for that matter.
There's an interesting story with a major operator that was implementing an drilling systems automation initiative, and they changed the display. The drilling people modified the display to the driller in a manner they thought that produced a much better human-machine interface, a much better display for his use. And they brought in people from midstream, mostly midstream, some downstream, who'd worked on automation in their areas, and they took one look at it and tore it apart within seconds and pointed out all the things that were wrong with it. So there's a lot of expertise that is out there in other industries that we're just not tapping into. And the one thing when you talk about data, I think it's very much about how the information is displayed. And there are clever ways to do it that people really absorb what's being given to them. And we just tend to stick with our old squiggly lines, which are not that good.
Very good. I think you got the last word there, John. Thank you so much for participating and sharing. And you too, Osama. You've been absolutely brilliant. I think the entire industry is saying thank you for you two being so open and sharing. So thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you, Magnus. I enjoyed doing this, and I think that the comments there are very good comments, and so it's a pleasure to read the comments as we were going through the discussion, so we knew more people were involved.
All right, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll wrap this up. Go check out Prowell Plan. I feel we touched a lot upon the value points that we are providing to the customers. I hope you enjoyed this. Our goal was to have to provide value to the industry about the highest risk that we have, and I think the participants shared very valuable insights. So check out prowellplan.com. Please comment, click like, and tell your friends. If you think that this was valuable, let them know on LinkedIn or elsewhere, and let us know what you want us to discuss the next time. But until then, have a great day. See you soon.